With that, I believe we are now recording as well. Okay, hard games, but why though? So I prepared some notes. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and I maybe just to save time now, I just like to oh no, now what? Now what happened? Oh well, now what
It's
happened?
working perfectly fine. It's
You
working
sure?
Fine.
perfectly fine. Don't touch
Yeah.
anything.
All
Yep.
right.
You're on talking points. We're good.
All right, good, great. Talking points number one. So I'm just going to read this out. It's something I took. It's coming from the heart, really, and it's like it's my cold open, just a 2 minute cold open. Okay, 1 minute cold open. So video games, as we know, is one thing that brings us all together, even though we are across the planet, across of continents, and but they have been something that still continue to gel us together regardless of where they are now and the quality of games that we see now. But they have been difficult right from the beginning. Outright games from the time that I remember. Brad is not here, but the games that we used to play were never ever easy. But they offered this promise of being fun for everyone. And sure, there were outliers here and there that were just absolutely no fun. They were just hard games, and RoboCop 2, Ninja Turtles when it first came out back in the day. However, the element of difficulty over fun, there's difficulty and there's fun and there's a balance. You strike a balance in between. The element of difficulty over fun has come to become a thing now, and it is just a thing. Sure, the fun part is there, but being difficult has just become a thing since 2009's Demon Souls on the PS3. I'm just almost done now, guys. A game that both of you are very extremely familiar with, a game that I borrowed from Sakib many years ago, and it was on my shelf for 10 years, and I never played it, and I gave it back to you, Sakib. And suddenly, there was a time where difficult games became a thing, and every other producer and their neighbor was to produce a medieval fantasy setting kind of a hard game, which has become a kind of a genre within itself, and you just keep to see those games. And my question is, are we the gamers, are we responsible for ruining the fun for everyone element and just glorifying the difficult part of video games? There you go.
Well, I don't think games are any harder than they've ever been. I think there's just a lot more of them. And the popular ones, people like to pretend are hard. The Dark Souls games, I don't believe that they're actually hard. They're challenging, but to say that they're hard and kind of shutting people out, I think is a little goofy. I looked up the trophy stats just on PlayStation, and Elden Ring, which everyone thinks is this impossible game. It's so hard. Oh, if you beat this, you're a god gamer. And I mean, it's like 11 or 12% of the people who started playing the game got the platinum trophy, which they did. That means they beat all the bosses. They did, everything within reason that you can possibly do in the game. And I've hunted trophies for a while. I just hit my 103rd platinum, so I know a little bit about those percentages. Anything over like 2% is kind of rare to see in a game that's not like you just got it to get platinum. Like most platinum trophy ranges are going to be somewhere between about 0.5 to 1.5%. So this is like 10 times that almost. So it's not, I don't think these games are hard. I think people believe the hype when everyone says they're hard. Somebody beat the game, they want to brag they did it. And then the communities tend to be a little unwelcoming, which I mean, it's probably the community anywhere online. It's kind of a bummer being in any of those. But they like to tell you, oh, you're doing that wrong. You're using the wrong weapon. Why didn't you use this build? And then you see YouTube flooded with, this is the ultimate build. This is where you do all your farming. This is how you beat this boss. Instead of just, you got to learn how to play the games. And I mean, Bloodborne's a huge example for me because I really, really loved how Bloodborne looked and how it played. And I was so bad at it. I was getting the crap beaten out of me. It took me years of trying and trying and trying and starting over before it finally clicked with me because I started to understand what the game was asking of me. And I think that's what gamers today tend not to do is what is this game asking of you? You can't play Bloodborne like you play Dark Souls. You can't play Sekiro like you play Dark Souls. You can't play, you can't play Tekken like you play Virtual Fighter. If you don't immediately get into a game, there's just so many options now. I think people just write it off as, oh, this is too hard for me. I'm just going to move on. The internet said it was hard. They're right. It's too hard. I can't do it. But I don't think that's the case. I think people are much less patient now. because we have such access to games. I have how many games are in your guys' backlog? Over 100 probably.
Yep.
But growing up, Contra was hard, Ninja Turtles was hard, but that's what you had. So you just did it. And then you learned how to play the game, I guess is my point.
And I gotta echo the sentiment here. My thought process is the same. I think these games aren't as hard as people make them out to be. I mean, look, if a guy like Kai Cenat, whose profession is actually being a streamer, actually beats Elden Ring's DLC. Granted, he died over 1,000 times, but he still beat it, right? So I think anybody can beat it then. And the reality is these games aren't necessarily hard. It's just you got to figure out how they work, right? It's one of the things I feel, and I agree that there was a time when there were limited games like you had Battletoads and you had Shinobi. Shinobi is a perfect example of a ridiculously hard game. You die, you start all the way over, right? The original Mega Mans, all these games, they were actually really, really hard. Now you look at speedrunners, they're beating them in like what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes flat, you know? So fundamentally, it's a skill perspective. I feel like that the loudest voice is that generation of gamers that have gotten older. And when they were at that age group, they were playing these games on the NES and the Super Nintendo that were very, very hard. And they got through them through perseverance. Now they're at this age that maybe they don't have that same reflex or that same sort of understanding or time to dedicate to games. I think it's more of a factor of time, right? To really understand it, the mechanics and the technicalities behind it to really get through it and beat it, right? I like using Sekiro as an example because I struggled with that game for a while, right?
I
And then I
still
sat
am.
down for and I figured it out. I sat down for a half an hour and just started practicing the parry in the game. And as soon as it made sense and it clicked, the entire game clicked. And then I watched these guys speedrun the games and crack these bosses that I was struggling with, and it made me realize that the game it's a replication of that time that when it was a different generation of gaming where you don't have the internet, you don't have all these videos, you just kept on experimenting over and over and over to get through these really difficult bosses. And now that's transitioned to this age where that difficulty is still there, but sort of the context and then the environment we play in has transformed, right? Now there's a lot of visibility, there's a lot of access, there's a lot of challenge, there's a lot of speedrunners. So there's a lot more conversations on these games. I guarantee you the same volume of people gave up on Battletoads, gave up on Shinobi, gave up on Contra, gave up on all these ridiculously hard games, but they had no way of being. I mean, they can't call up Nintendo, oh my God, your game is so hard, and Nintendo's going to be publishing that. It's not going to happen, right? But now everyone has a voice because of social media, and then people love to complain. They love to be given that space. So I don't think games have gotten harder. I do feel like there's more of a attitude that, oh, I'm a macho man, I've been in this game. But in essence, I feel that same conversations, that context still exists. There are very easy games, there are very difficult games. But I feel like we're a bit too critical and harsh for other people. I mean, you can't tell someone, oh, get good. If you can't play Elden Ring, go play Peppa Pig. That's not right. Come on, you can't tell people to do that. But other than that, I think it's pretty much the same.
Well, that's the kind of advice the community thrives on, regardless of, as Max said, regardless of game, you go to an online community and get good is the best advice you're gonna get. Well, somebody like myself who has actually been away from games, and over the years, of course, as you also say, Sakib, slower reflexes for 47 years old, not getting any younger, and trying to get back into games just recently, but have been in touch. And being away from game, and on all the communication that I have received was that this game is hard. Do you want to get back into a kind of game that'll take you back to the time when I used to be a kid playing Ninja Gaiden 1, and if you're out, you start all over. You have three tries, four tries, but then you start all over from the beginning, no save point,
Yeah,
nothing. And it makes me wonder,
yeah,
now today it makes me wonder, do I want to go back to that time and play that kind of game all over again? It's something that I felt that as gamers, we graduated past that kind of a game. Now we can make checkpoints. We can, and we have been making use of checkpoints along the way on the journey, on the video game journey. We have had all these games with checkpoints, hand holding, and everything. And suddenly, do I want to go back to 1970? As you rightly say, it's also a lot to do with the way the game is being projected to new players like myself, now a new player, for these type of games. So yeah, good points, good points. What do you think? That's my perspective. I see a game, and all the marketing just keeps me at bay. I remember Sakib having Demon Souls, your copy, and Dark Souls 2, and never playing it even once. And they were just there, and I would look at them, and and as Max said, I would always have alternatives. Why don't I play a game where I can save at a checkpoint and just get to the end of the game and play the next game?
I
Great.
mean, if I can contextualize it, right? Just one thought. Remember when you played the original Resident Evil, I think Resident Evil 2, when it first came out, and there were all these surprises and jump scares which just knocked you out, and you're like, what the hell just happened? Right? And it's a similar context with these games as well, right? Like you play Elden Ring, there's a normal enemy, you go up and you hit them, and it turns into a gigantic ass bear who just proceeds to decimate you. Like, what the hell just happened to me?
I hate that
Ruined
guy.
bears are like are
The
like
whole
a
damn
bonus
boss.
surprise.
They're so hard. I hate
Yeah.
ruined bears.
And it's for me it's that it's that like what the hell just happened? I enjoy it, it was funny.
I think that is my favorite part of Elden Ring is like the discovery and the surprises. I'm not very good at Elden Ring. I still haven't finished it. I'm at the guy who takes his shirt off and power bombs you around. I can't get past him. But I always just, I like leaving, like, ride touring around a little bit, find some caves, you see some interesting enemies, maybe get some loot you never saw before, and you just kind of have a good time. But then that kind of reaches back to the point you made about having the time, where I'm in a fortunate spot where, my job, once I'm done working, I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have kids. It's just, me and my partner. So, I have the freedom of time to commit to something like that where I can go, okay, I'm not having fun fighting this boss, but I'm gonna have fun for 45 minutes riding around looking at the scenery, just kind of taking a walk almost in a game.
Yeah.
Okay, point number two is maybe we already have decided on this. The case for or against hard games. I would still like to stick to a couple of points.
I it's eating you from the inside that we're both for it. I know, I can tell.
Is it
Well,
here?
I'd like to circle around just right now and kind of like what to you makes a game hard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yes. So I did have a couple of points. I have issues, and yeah, it's not just me. Maybe I'm speaking for a small group of people like myself who have issues with one-shot insta kills. Maybe people who have issue with less or no hand holding. Bloodborne, for instance, is a game I also put maybe more than 2 hours, nearly 3 hours into Bloodborne, which and having gotten really nowhere with it. And as you say, my situation is different from any other players, and I did not have the time or patience to spend another half hour to just get beat at the same point again and again. So a little hand holding would have been nice to know if I could have, right at the beginning, if I was able to parry, if that was an information, provided to me. Hey, you can parry, and this is actually going to, or you can block. I could press buttons, but there is a certain timing to it. So maybe a level of hand holding. Um, also, one other thing is that, yeah, so with evolution, games have just become, thanks to the controller, just become a lot more complicated. Back in the day,
I
maybe,
agree.
yeah,
I think that's
just
a big piece of it is instead of having, A and B in your directional buttons, you have I don't even remember how many buttons are on a controller now.
yeah, exactly. You got 8 buttons, 9, 10, I don't know, exactly 12. You have the LR presses as well. You got Astrobot with the physics going as well. I don't know what the future is going to hold, how much interaction is going to be required of you as of gamers to play games. But yeah, with A, B, games were hard enough with just A, B. They were like brutal with just A and B. And now it's just become, to me, a more of a challenge. Yep.
I think that's also part of the reason I'm really struggling with Baldur's Gate 3. I
Oh,
want to play it, but I'm find myself fighting remembering how to control and actually play the game and get to all my menus and remember how to do everything rather than sort of
Hmm.
immerse myself in it. So I just haven't been able to tackle it. And if a game is difficult, I guess, and you're also kind of fighting the controls more than you're fighting the enemies, I can see that being
Hmm.
a pretty big turnoff for playing that game.
Yeah, no, I think I can relate to that point. Like I've tried playing from a controller perspective, I tried playing Final Fantasy 14 online on the PlayStation, and I'm like, okay, I cannot play this without a mouse and a keyboard. This is driving me crazy. It doesn't work with the controller. So the controller does play a huge aspect. Like used to be the guy who would play like Mega Man and stuff on the keyboard. So like
Oh, wow.
summer break, I had the entire Super Nintendo, Nintendo collections. I cannot say how and why because Nintendo is being very litigious nowadays.
thanks,
So,
thanks.
so I had that entire collection. I played through all of them on a keyboard and mouse, right? So, I mean, but now I do understand the value of having like a controller for a Metroidvania, and then like a better input system for a game that requires this. I think like games like Baldur's Gate, they really need like a PC, like a laptop and a mouse controller to really, make sense of it. Like I don't know if you're using a PS5 like a controller or the laptop, but that really makes a difference, right? Like even I have Divinity Sin, Original Sin 2, and I cannot for the life of me progress in it because it's such a frustration, moving the camera and getting things done, and so I do get that. I think there are certain optimization challenges, if that's the right terminology. It's certain games are built for certain mediums, and while I understand that you want to expand your market reach, you need to then also make sure that it actually it's playable on that sort of system and console.
Yeah, and I think that almost circles back to the point of like learning to meet the game on its terms. Like, how does this game want to be played? And if you're kind of going against
Mm.
that grain, either with how you're playing the game or, the peripheral you're using to play it, is that sort of hamstringing you and giving you a suboptimal experience, we'll say.
Hmm.
Yeah, but look, there's one thing I do want to add here. I mean, in the last Awesome Games Done Quick marathon, this guy beat Sekiro blindfolded. Okay, so I mean, I think there's no human ingenuity and just the just sheer willpower and practice time, right? And resilience to beat that freaking game blindfolded live. That's just insanity, you know?
But why? Why though? Why though? I don't get it.
Wasn't hard enough otherwise. That's why.
Wasn't hard enough.
Man, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I feel, with the complex controls, is one more thing I had written down. I missed this was, yeah, over the years, controls have just become complicated. And now I see this trend that developers are trying to like uncomplicate things. And maybe if we just jump a genre from fantasy medieval to fighting games, you see the auto combos and the one button supers just starting to make a comeback and become a very, a thing that is just a normal thing now. Just make games more accessible than what they used to be. Uh, which brings me back to the first point that games were hard enough to begin with, and maybe they always already were. With the quarter circle twice or whatever complicated motions for super moves in fighting games, and then to make them complex to the point where they have to simplify it again so more people can come and start playing it is.
I was talking to Brad last night, and I was a little inebriated, and I was casually fighting Ludwig the Accursed, like with no issue at all. Who's like supposedly one of the hardest bosses in the game, and I was just like totally
Yeah.
distracted, can't even really see straight, and I'm just like jumping around beating them. So, Bloodborne hard, that doesn't work on me, I'm afraid.
Sorry. Elden Ring hard. I don't know.
So wait, Ludwig, I'm so sorry. Ludwig is the DLC one, right?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that guy is rough. Dang. Yeah. Just to answer your question, I feel like, it's sort of like the argument is in favor, is driven by maybe what we feel is ideal for a particular game, right? So think about it this way. Street Fighter 6 fighting games have really exploded in popularity, right? With all the tournaments, multi-million dollar prizes and whatnot, right?
Mm.
So it would make sense for these companies to increase the number of people playing it. One of the best ways to get people into games is by boosting accessibility. And that's why they have that mode, and it's balanced, right? I don't think anyone who's won a tournament has used the helping mode. I don't know yet, to be honest, but it's still, it's meant to allow people to ease into that game. Because think about it this way: if I go online and I fight someone who's like diamond rank and they wreck me like 20 times in a row, I'm not picking that game up again, right? But if I put up a challenge and I beat them five of those times because I at least have some ability to understand and play with the game and its combos, I'll be more into it. And from a business standpoint, it creates more longevity for me and increases the audience that I can bring into the game.
Mm.
Vice versa, I think there are certain aspects of, say, Elden Ring that it did make easier by, for example, allowing you to pull in a familiar in every single boss fight, right? And that familiar did make the game easier and more accessible. I, without question, use familiars in boss fights, particularly Malenia, because yeah, I'm sorry, I can't say the word. No, no, I can't. Particularly Malenia, fuck Malenia, man. Seriously, god damn, that boss fight was was a pain in the ass. Uh, but I use a familiar because it just drove me crazy. But in general, there are going to be different ways of creating accessibility. I'm sorry, this is going R-rated already.
You get one. You get one though. I
Yeah,
think it's still
one.
like it'll be PG-13, right?
Yeah, one is PG-13. It's okay.
So that's my view.
No, that's fair. That is fair. Although, what's to hurt from software from getting more sales if they have just a more accessible mode? I would love to play a game that is not marketed to me as an extremely hard game. I would love to play it, but
I think at a point,
Yeah,
if they need to, they will. But
yeah,
every game
possibly
they make, which people say are harder and harder, I don't know if that's necessarily true. They're just a little different, but they're like more and more sales. So they haven't needed to sort of back down from
true,
what their vision is for the game.
true. That's true. That's true.
Look, and you got to understand this. Elden Ring sold 25 million copies as of June
Yeah,
this year.
yeah.
So that's I don't think they need to prove this to anyone that, oh, we need to do it, we're
Oh
doing
yeah.
something wrong.
We don't need an easy
Money
mode,
speaks for
normal
it, right?
mode. You have just
Yeah.
one
That's
mode.
what they're doing wrong. Remake Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. At MRSP price of $60, that's $1.5 billion just for Elden Ring. So
It's hitting home.
I think the money speaks for itself. Yeah. I mean that same aspect is why like Genshin Impact and MiHoYo are like have made like $9 billion. Because apparently people like those games.
Right.
That might be a topic for another show.
Oh yeah.
Predatory game.
DLC. DLC particularly.
Why only action RPGs though? Action RPGs, medieval fantasy really is the genre, is the type of game which is just so incredibly hard. Okay, maybe I should like refrain from the hard though, but that's the topic of the whole discussion is hard games for people like myself. But this seems to be a very a focused, targeted kind of a difficulty level for this kind of a genre, the medieval fantasy or the action RPG, which ultimately is a sword swinging and dodging. Say for a couple of games here and there, Remnant, uh, another odd game or two, which would be a third-person shooter. But generally speaking, it's a swashbuckling kind of a fantasy game. Why not like Contra Souls, or I don't know.
I think that's just kind of the hot kind of game right now.
Hmm.
They really haven't had much of a miss since they started. They're immensely popular. I mean, look at YouTube. There's millions of hours of lore videos, challenge videos, full playthroughs, glitch videos. I think it's just so in the just are in the community. Everybody just is about those games that there are hard games in other genres. We just don't really hear about them because they're not really at the forefront. Just last weekend, I was playing Crash Bandicoot 4, I think. Me and my partner are going through it. She's just doing all the levels. I'm doing the bosses, and we got to was it Neo Cortex or whatever that guy is? And I was like, just give me Ornstein and Small right now. This guy is driving me nuts. It was just I couldn't get a handle on this guy. So I think there's games that are really difficult in other genres. It's just what level of exposure do you have to those genres, and what level of exposure is being put out there for those genres, which is relatively low, I think, for a lot of them.
No, sorry, maybe.
If you think about it,
Sorry, Sakib. Yeah, please.
that's, yeah, no worries. Like if you look at the indie scene as well, right? There are certain games that are challenging. Celeste, I have put that game down on many occasions. There's Spelunky 2, Baba is You. There are all these games. I mean, I agree. I think there's just certain games that are more prominent, or they get more visibility, or it might be just that the difficulty is easier to tune in these games. Like Returnal is a great example. It is a challenging game. But then again, if you look at speedrunning community and awesome games done quick, Returnal is done in 1 hour. I'm like, what the hell is this, man? So
Yeah, I suppose I wasn't able to word this point correctly. What I wanted to get at was maybe is a question really is this just a fad that the this kind of game is just going to be the medieval fantasy type of a game, Mortal Shell, Neo isn't even a From Software game, but there was a point where any other game that was difficult or hard was just had to be sword, magic, spells, defeat gigantic screen filling bosses kind of a game. Um,
mm,
and it seemed to be a thing that every other publisher, not all of them, but lots of the big names were just making this type of game. Even now, Wu Long, and then to an extent, maybe also Wukong, the monkey game. I keep forgetting the name, the action Donkey Kong
mm,
game. Even that is,
mm.
it has to be the same type of a thing, but, sword or bamboo stick or whatever, but destroy that screen-filling, fantastical, mythical creature type of a thing. Uh, but there are a couple of outliers, like Returnal.
Yeah, but you have to be fair, right? It's a business. They're gonna sell what they feel like is gonna make them money, right? I do feel like the Soulsborne genre is now its own thing.
Yeah,
And you do see it a lot in discussions. So, I'm perfectly fine with that. Think about it this way: Metroidvania is one of my favorite type of games. I'm happy it's its own genre. Like I just found, you probably got a notification as well because of the Steam sharing that I got. I bought like a couple of Metroidvanias because they were on sale. I'm like, oh, I'm happy. You bought Castlevania Dominus, man. Please, come on.
like it's that's the type of difficult game that I can still play. I am from that time. I am from that time zone from back in the day.
Yeah.
But I think what you see so many of these action RPGs right now is it's just that's the end thing right now. I mean, we got
Yeah.
through when the end things were platformers back in the day. We got through military shooters. We got through cover-based shooters. We got through these things, and now this is just lasting what feels like a little bit longer than the others to us
Exactly,
probably because we're getting
exactly.
old and approaching death, and time seems to be going so fast.
It really took me just looking at it from the from the bird's eye view. It really took me back to the 90s where everyone was making a fighting game. That just everybody had to make a fighting game
Mm,
just because two games got
mm,
popular.
mm,
Is this just also a fad that every other game has to be this kind of a game? Because back then Ninja Turtles had to be a fighting game. Castlevania had to be a fighting. There was a Castlevania fighting game.
Or was it was on the
Really?
Wii, wasn't it?
Something like, yeah, exactly.
That's
Yes,
crazy,
yes.
man.
Yep, there was a Castlevania. I mean, why? But everybody had to make a fighting game because Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat were making money. Is this also just a fad? I guess time will tell, or maybe
Yeah,
we're just
I
getting
don't
old.
think we need time. I think you're right. It is a fad because you look at the volume of the games coming up. There's like that Kazan the First Berserker coming out, which is from the Dungeon and Fighter world. That's also in that same vein, Metroidvania. Then there are a bunch of games, right? Lies of P, although which is very popular, got really good ratings. It was speedrun as well. So I do feel like it's a genre on its own, and everyone's trying to get their share of the pie because there is a popularity there.
What I like about so many different people doing it is seeing the little tweaks they make to the formula. Or if they do something interesting with it, that's the kind of thing that it really tickles me in a game where it's like Lies of P is a really good example of it because there is a very similar system to Sekiro's parry, but you can also block. But if you block, you take a little bit of damage, but that damage is like the Bloodborne damage, where if you hit back right away, you regain it.
Oh,
So it's kind of combining a lot of different ideas from
Mm.
popular games that did it well and incorporating it in their own in a very good way. And I just like to see other people's take on a formula, I guess, which is good that it's so popular because it's fun.
Lies of P is a game we didn't mention. I didn't mention. I should have written it down, but it's been on my list. I learned recently that it's still one of the more. It's difficult, but one of the more comparatively accessible games for a player like myself. I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed. You're the Lies of P expert, Max.
I would. I think it's harder than
Oh.
Bloodborne and any of the Dark Souls I've played. I haven't finished it yet. I'm close to the end, but it's
Wow.
especially if you. I was talking about struggling with a lot of buttons because there's a lot to keep track of in that game. You hold a button to access a whole nother tool belt. There's parrying, dodging, blocking. There's 2 different weapons. You assemble your own weapons. It's a very good freedom of expression game because you can slap any handle onto any blade and make a completely different weapon, and it's this is how much damage it does and this is the moveset it has, and then you can alter yourself that way. But I think personally I find it much more difficult than a Bloodborne or a Dark Souls.
Yeah. If you really want to get into the Soulsborne game, I'd highly recommend you try either Demon Souls. Demon Souls is pretty straightforward because it's like honestly only 5 areas to traverse, or Sekiro because you only have the one weapon, technically speaking.
I would step in and say Mortal Shell. That was the first one where those games started to click with me. It takes stats right out of it. You don't have to level up stats. There's nothing to do with that. There's no durability. There's no armor pieces or anything like that. It's a relatively short game. It's not super hard. The hardest part's probably getting to the bosses, and the bosses are kind of a joke. But I mean, that's the one that it started to make sense to me. What kind of I had to fit into the flow of that game, and I was like, oh, that's just probably what my problem is. I'm not fitting into the flow of these other games, and that's where it started to take off from there. But yeah, I mean, if that doesn't work for you, try Sekiro because it's a different style. You might like that, or find another one you might want to try. Fleet Faith Forsaken, actually, with the most recent patch in the console launch, I got through that game twice, and I think it's a really good twist on the Souls-like formula. Because you have a traditional leveling up experience system, you don't lose anything when you die. You just kind of lose the progress you were at. So it's a little bit more approachable in that way.
Yeah, I do want to add a point here. Games are going to be mechanically complex, and they're going to create difficulty as well, right? Honestly, with Sekiro, what you could just go on YouTube and just watch a couple of the beginner guide videos, and it'll really help you make sense of how the mechanics in that game work. I'll give you an example. I played through Xenoblade Chronicles 2. After 10 hours, I had no idea how the freaking combat worked. I actually had to watch a 40-minute long video to understand how the game's freaking mechanics worked. And honestly, the entire subreddit was recommending that video because it was so stupidly complex and not well explained at all. So yeah, you have resources available now. You don't have to call Nintendo's help hotline to get help.
I am going to stay away from Nintendo for a while. Bonus point for Maxi. Well, maybe next time. This was one of the topics that Sakib and I were really not. Your quick 1 minute outro on live service games, Maxi. Go. The floor is yours.
I hate them. I was a Destiny crack addict, and then it was fun when it started, and then it started when it was turning money, and it was the microtransactions. I had to step away, and then I just churn and burn things so quickly. It's really hard. I was gonna I'll get back into Destiny. I hadn't played it for like 9 months, and I had no idea what was going on anymore. Planets were gone. The build that I had didn't even work anymore. And it was so overwhelming with the number of things and pop-ups and go here and talk to, and it's just, they just want to keep you in that game as long as you can and come in every day. And I was immediately stressed out. So I'm hoping that live service games go away. That's what I'm hoping.
I have another analogy. Think of live service games as your crack dealer, right? You get a little bit and you keep wanting more. You keep going back for more.
It's not good.
And then you break away, and he tells you, hey, I got a new version of it. You want some? And then it's just like the Dave Chappelle character was constantly scratching his neck, and after crack, that's how it is. That's how these games are. They get you addicted.
And they go one step further. They go, hey, you got any friends? You got to get your friends hooked on the junk.
Yeah. Get your friends. You bring a friend. You get another like bit of crack for you.
Yeah, right.
All right, gents. Thank you for your time. It's always lovely to speak with Max, you, and Sakib, you, and to have both of you together on this momentous occasion for the first time ever. Both of my buddies together. We miss Brad. I wish he was also here, but maybe we'll get him next time.
We'll drag them in here.
Okay, have a great weekend, both of you. And I
All
hope
right,
we
yeah,
catch
it
up.
was
I
great
hope we
meeting
get to
you.
catch up again. Yep, hope we get to catch up again soon.
Likewise. I'll see you guys. Cheers.
All
Thank you.
right.